Well, when he gets done, you can drive through there. But yeah, but you'll have to wait on this dirt.
I didn't even know they were doing construction back here.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, we tried to resist it, but so many people didn't realize how much pain it would be to them until it was.
Oh, they built it?
Well, they hadn't started building anything. They've just torn it up. It's been over a year since they took the timber off that 28 acres. Been here in 6 Street.
Oh, wow.
3 trailer parks went, and a bunch of houses on Hill Avenue, and up there around this part of Duncan that's up there. All that's gone. Yeah.
I've been in this area a long time. It's been at least that long.
Oh God! Hey! Go! Hey! Back! Straight up, real careful. Straight back. Come on back. Keep going. Come back. Now bring it down. Hey, you're new at this. We've been enjoying this for over a year. They took the trees out starting last June, and I think I tell you those trees in there are supposed to be a little park. They're dedicated that small part as a park, but they cut the roots off.
They inside the drip line, didn't they?
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah.
I don't know why truck drivers do that. You know, I was doing a job down on 40. One driver took off with his box in there, went under a bridge, threw his box off his truck.
Oh, God.
That's almost a major fuck up.
Go bring command.
Thank you, sir.
Ooh.
Y'all only needed 2 loads, sir?
Were you a Marine? Is that a Marine logo? Oh, it's Jesus, but it's got that
Marine
seagull emblem like a Marine or anchor. Yeah, anchor.
Way anchor.
All I need is 2 right here. All right, man.
All right, take that one.
Be careful. Jimmy Rogers song in the 30s. I'm going back here, Dixie. My uncle died a few years ago. He could do it just like Jimmy Rogers. One time I had my dad die in. And my heart is filled with pain for a miles away from and you know how he was singing for I think it's name about Jimmy Rogers. Remember? He was good. He sang on the hayride back in the church when I was a kid.
Jimmy Rogers was on the few of them, and I didn't get to ever hear in person.
No, I didn't either. But they were back on the radio way back then.
I remember when I was a kid, Hank Williams, Darren Young.
Walk up to the break, just to give him they'd always come to Dad's house. The next was dobro guitar Dad had bought. He had bought this dobro guitar and had played for somebody somewhere along the line. After he was 16 when he bought it, he had played for this person, and they had told these guys about him and that guitar.
Yeah.
And he never did a commercial recording or anything, but all of these guys that were getting big in the industry of recording in the late 30s and early 40s came to visit him. And I don't know whether it was his style of playing or what. I don't know really why.
He must have mastered it real well. Yeah.
But they'd come about once a year, maybe sometimes much twice a year, and they'd have a picking and grinning. Of course, needless to say, they liked his homemade wine too, so that might have been the other attraction.
What was your dad's name?
John, just like mine.
But John's what? I can't.
B-A-L-T-Z.
Yeah, B-A-L-T-Z. I've got your name written down on your picture at home on the computer, but I can't remember.
Oh, I wish he'd quit that, Jim. I swear, you're older than him.
Granddad,
Every time
back in the days of, I don't forget which governor it was now.
I like to hear him sing.
I think it was Ben Daly. During that time was Prohibition time. Grandpa made wine too. Everybody in the family made wine since as far back as we could tell. And the governor would come up in his limousine with the state police. And in the back of that big limousine, but you know what they looked like, big square and boxy in the 30s, they would pull the seat up. And under that seat, that level of the stuff like this was big enough that you could lay a half-gallon or a gallon jug down on that side. So they'd check real good to make sure it wouldn't leak. They'd lay them down on the side to side, all the way across to the differential, drive shaft pump, and then they'd go on the other side, same thing. My dad said that was a once-a-month affair. Come up and get wine from him.
Well, do you remember who was the governor at that time? What was his name?
Then, I'm getting old. I used to remember it. I knew it. But he was whatever in the 30s. He was about by the time I grew up big enough, I could remember Sherry and Faubus and the one that died here a while back. Can't think of what his name is.
Win Paul.
Who?
You're talking about Win Paul Rockefeller?
No.
His dad was governor?
Yeah. No, this was the governor himself. I can't think of his name now.
I know what you're talking about now. Yeah. Okay.
But this man was governor long before that. Yeah, Hank played that one time at the house for Dad before he recorded it. And died 4 months later.
Oh, okay.
That was the song that he recorded in October of '53. He died in November. It was right after he recorded that song. That was one of his only few that he did himself, that he actually wrote himself. Most of Hank Williams' songs were written by people like Farron Young and those, and he would do them up.
Well, that's one of the things my Uncle Allen's told me before he died was, you remember Governor of Louisiana made Yard My Sunshine real famous. Made a lot of money off of selling that. But a friend of my uncle's was the one who wrote it, but he never got credit. The government claimed credit and everything for writing.
Look at that.
Thank you all.
Jimmy Davis.
Jimmy Davis, right? Yeah.
Yes, sir, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
There was another one, Long, or what were they also saying?
Well, Huey Long, and then later, after Jimmy Davis, then Earl Long got to be governor.
Earl was the one that sang.
No, Huey. Jimmy Davis was singer.
One of the two Long.
Well, maybe a little bit, but
Not
nothing
like
this.
like Davis,
No.
yeah.
No, he was big. Well, they've taken the trees down, and now they've dug up in the right of way and piled it over in the Smith's yard. And of course, this is part of the Heritage Trail. We got the nice sign there. Isn't that special? And an area that has a dedicated person to clean it up. We're near the southwest corner of World Peace Wetland Prairie. It's right over there. And we're looking at one of the button bushes. Classic wetland plant. And what we're worried about is that we're not identifying them all because the buttons aren't showing on many at this time. This one, you can see rather large area covered with a button bush here. Not large enough, but that one root system has limbs from there over to there, and that's probably 8 feet or more. It's an idea of substantial bushes that could get taller, and should do in the swamps of southeast and provide some pretty good cover for wildlife, particularly birds. We're hoping it can be significant in the restoration process. But that one needs honeysuckle removed from it, and but it's not as covered as thickly as many of them. 40 feet to the east, approximately, find another plant that has its buttons showing, but it's not as extensive, not as large, not as widespread, but it's pretty successful. And this is one we removed honeysuckle from several stems here 2 or 3 days ago, and it appears to be doing well. But fall's coming, and it's going to be 36 degrees tonight, so frost is going to affect everything tomorrow, I think. We'll see how the World Peace Wetland Prairie starts to change with what will be possibly the first significant frost tonight, early in the morning. We're looking at the cattails and willows along the south edge of World Peace Wetland Prairie. or the soup branch, runs from Pinnacle property, former Campbell Soup property, drains many acres, and runs down into the town branch of the West Fork of the White River after it flows east under South Duncan Avenue. So, quite a good stand of cattails here. Over the years it changes, but it seems like since the decade I've lived here, it's been consistently here to some degree. And so that's it's just a representative part of what we have in this area. This is a large caterpillar. As Terry said, come photograph it, and said it was about 8 inches long. Well, it's more than 3 inches long. It's a big caterpillar. Unless there's a bigger one here somewhere. But only one I see. That would get your attention, and it's incredibly large. And don't we want to know what creature it is in other parts of its life? Gee whiz. There's my finger. So it's pretty long. But it's a beautiful creature, regardless of its size. Kind of shy. Interesting, I don't see that it's eaten a whole lot. The stem's got a few strip places, but it's taking its time working on this plant. Great myrtle, is it? Yeah, but if you go up higher, you see some stems that have been worked over pretty well. And this guy's, boy, the size he is, he's easily eaten that much in the last day or two. What a beauty. And what does he become? Oh, about to be frost tonight. We're lucky to have got him today. We don't know what happens tonight or in the morning when there's frost. Will he be okay? He looks tough to me. Well, they just don't seem to notice that they might be in somebody's way here.
Something that probably this is the best time to talk about it now is if somebody goes out there and takes all the vegetation off or does something to the landscape. And when we went out there to do a wetland delineation or look at it to see if it had it, we would look at the site first of all to see if it was typical or atypical. Where atypical means it's been disturbed, it's been modified or changed. Then, instead of looking, we might look at that one site, kind of, see the soils and what was there in the hydrology, see it happen. But what we would do is we'd look around if it was an atypical situation. Maybe on the adjoining piece of property, maybe right across the fence or right next to it, would be an area that looked like it was typical and resembled the area that we were questioning. So then what we would do is we'd go to that adjoining site and take our data. In other words, we'd report the plants and everything, off site. But now if it's a typical, if we decided it hadn't been disturbed, then we would do it right there on site, exactly where we were at. But
We have had to do that a lot of times where we would have an atypical situation where it had been manipulated, and if we could find a place adjacent to it that was same elevation pretty much, and same what we would think would be the same type of vegetation and soils and so on, without that much change in topography, we would inventory the site there next to it, and we've had to do that several times.
a lot of times you get out on the side and, like I say, if it's been bulldozed or something, it's just clean and there's not any all the piles for the dozer decks where it still had the trees and everything in it where you couldn't identify anything. Well, then your only option is to go, to adjoining side right next to it and see if you can see what type of vegetation you thought was in
And if the adjoining sites are different, you'll have to do the best you can to find out where it has been cleared. And we have gone into dozer piles to identify the trees that were there. And so even when they're piled up and all the leaves are gone, we had to do that a few times. Any other questions before we move on?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I don't have much time. Would you say your name for me, gentlemen? I'm Aubrey Shepard from next door, and
Okay, I'm Jerry McGarry.
And you're with?
Well, I'm retired.
You're retired?
Just doing some volunteer
From the
work.
Corps, or?
From the Natural Resources Conservation Service.
Okay.
Out of Fort Smith.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Glenn Laurent, resource soil scientist with the Natural Resources Conservation Service.
Currently.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Now, keep in mind now, Jerry and I been on the wetlands team. We were dealing with ag land, pasture and cropland. But we have been trained in using the Corps manual because when we're working with a client, not only does he might have pasture and cropland, ag land, but he may have small areas of woodland, might be corridors or just small spots or patches. And so we'd have to make a determination on those, which is non-ag land. And so we've been trained in using the Corps manual so we can make the determination not only on the cropland, but on the non-ag land. One of the reasons that we were doing the delineation, the reason we were trained, now under the Clean Water Act, it was EPA that was given responsibility for the wetlands, but then they turned, I guess, the regulation part over to the Corps of Engineers, and they started out doing all the wetlands. And then we inherited all the ag part. So Jerry and I worked on ag lands, and the Corps still has jurisdiction over the non-ag land. And the reason we are interested in the ag land is that you can't use government money. In other words, all the government programs and all the things we were going through with the landowners and the farmers, they were getting government funds for their cropping, the things they were doing on the farm, in other words, for any conservation practices, anything they were doing. Well, of course, we need to know whether it was ag land or not, or whether it's wetland, because you can't receive government funding to convert wetlands. And so that's the first thing we had to do is determine if they said they'd done some clearing or done any manipulation or anything out there, drainage or anything like that. We had to determine whether or not they had converted a wetland. And then that would determine whether or not they were eligible for any financial assistance for any government programs.
So what if you go in, oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, I'm saying if you go in and realize that they have been doing these farming practices on a delineated wetland, then do they have to do like a restoration and turn it back into a wetland, or they just forego any government help that they might have gotten after that?
Yes and yes. If they want to, most of the time they want to continue to participate in the government programs, and so then they have to mitigate or restore what they, in other words, whatever they messed up, they've got to repair that. And if they want to mitigate, then somebody has to go in and determine the value of the land that they converted, and then the value, decide the value of the land that they want to mitigate with, to make sure that they're, it may not be an acre per acre mitigation. It may be, they may have to do an acre and a half or 2 acres to make up for the acre that they changed.
Okay, so it's a true. Okay.
So, yes.
And now, is that determination an arbitrary process, or is there kind of like a formula that you go by for that?
There's strict guidelines, and it's not much fun, I can tell you. Very strict guidelines, and have worksheets, and there's different ways that you have questions, and you go through and you have to evaluate each part of the wetland and assign it numerical values, and then you have to go to the area they want to use to mitigate, and look at it and assign it numerical values, and then you come up with a balance of how much they have to put back into wetland to make up for what they took out.
So they actually have, a tree is worth X amount of dollars?
No.
No.
It's generally, well, that comes into it. Vegetation.
Well, the type of vegetation.
Yeah, the type of vegetation. Yes.
Right. If it's and the soil. See, the soil is a big thing too, and hydrology. And you get back to these 3 items: soils, hydrology, and also you consider what they took off, how long maybe it's going to take for you to get these values, functions, and values back on that mitigated site. It's kind of a time situation there as far as that goes. But you put all this together on what it was prior to conversion, and look at the site for mitigation, how long it's going to take to get back those functions and values that were destroyed, and then you work through that formula, and then you'll get a ratio, how many acres to mitigate opposed to what was destroyed. So it may be a 1.5 to 1, maybe 2 to 1, depending on the situation. So,
is there a statute of limitations?
Well, not really that I know of that's written, but however, probably I think the Corps, maybe after a certain number of years, they think that their chances for any kind of fines or anything on that are diminished after a certain number of years, so they might not pursue it as hard after a few years. So they found out several years later that it was converted as if it was a new conversion. And if it was a new conversion, they would jump on that road right quick and pursue it.
So if it happened in the 20s, wouldn't even worry about it. If it happened in the 70s maybe, or are we talking about?
If it was, say if it was 10 years ago, that if they found out or could determine that it was converted 10 years ago, or maybe 7 or 8 years ago, they would be less likely to pursue that as much as if it was 2 or 3 years ago.
And if land had changed hands,
that could have some bearing on it, yes, as far as the Corps is concerned, and EPA. And here again, it depends on their workload. If they have a very heavy workload and can't get to it very soon, they're less likely to pursue it. Depends on a lot of factors.
We run into situations where some type of landowner inadvertently converted a wetland unknowing that he was creating a violation. And in a lot of cases like that, it was just a matter of fencing the area off and letting it grow back up. Keep the cows off of it and just letting it return naturally. That's the easy way to do it. And we've seen several situations, and other times that they require maybe to fence it and to plant trees. Or is it just different things that you just don't know exactly how it's going to go, but a lot of it has to do with the quality of the wetland that was converted and how important we feel like it was. So sometimes you get off pretty easy, and what the farmer or the landowner would be out would be the cost of the dozer work that he put in to clear it. and then the fact of losing the use of the land for his, what he hoped to do with it. So anyway, there's a lot of circumstances.
They can have, of course, if a person is involved with agricultural programs, is getting money through agricultural programs, and some of this money is totally cut off as far as the landowner is concerned. He can usually afford to go back and let a small area go back up in native natural vegetation to restore or to maintain his USDA program benefits that he gets. So it's certainly an incentive to be careful.
Oh yeah.
Does a Walmart wetland, I don't know how to say that, but like the Walmart wetland, does that fall under you guys too, or who's that fall?
No, that's purely an artificial wetland.
Pretty much a Corps or consultant would do that.
Yeah.
We would try to stay away from that.
It's not ag land. We don't get involved in non-ag land until one of our clients, if he has a combination of ag and non-ag, then we'll work the non-ag land. But we don't, if somebody just has non-ag land, we don't go out there to start with. And if it's being converted from ag to non-ag use, for instance like a subdivision or a super center or whatever it may be, we don't do that. Because that's not a non-ag use, so we wouldn't be involved with that.
I wonder, do they take the same measures though, such as the land trade? Like if they want to build a super center in this area, this delineated wetland, then they would trade maybe 200 acres for the 100 acres that they're going to build on?
I think so.
They do something similar?
I think they have to mitigate.
I think they do have to mitigate.
Yeah, but
I'm not sure exactly how
he did answer for that for sure.
Since we're not involved.
But if you notice the one on 6th Street, the ditch in front of the store has become one of the better looking detention ponds in the whole area. Most of the subdivisions and so forth don't have them that well done. They've got trees and vegetation, cypress trees planted.
Yeah, they planted some of those. That's a real nice spot over there.
It's
very, very interesting too. It's got all the criteria. It's been artificially enhanced.
right.
But the vegetation and everything we put there, and makes it an interesting place to look at. We visit there quite often in some places.
So if you have an artificial wetland that has been enhanced such that all three criteria are there, is that now, even though it wasn't a wetland before, because that was put in place, do we now have to follow all regulations for a wetland?
Generally, if it's a small area, there's a nationwide exemption that doesn't put it, that it doesn't get caught up in the regulations. In other words, like a farm pond, a farm pond over a period of time will develop vegetation around the edges, and of course it's got the water and vegetation, and of course over a period of time the soils will go anaerobic too. And you've got a wetland, but it's an artificial wetland, and generally those are exempt from any regulations. But if you go out here into an area that's been classified as a wetland and enhance it, put a pond in it, well, of course, first of all, you got to get permission to put a pond in it, but there's a lot of ponds that's been built in a wetland that happened before the law come into effect. Well, then I think those, since it is a wetland around it, then that pond becomes a part of the wetland, and it is regulated. It would be.
Well, another thing that I don't know how you guys do it on agricultural land, but I think a retired member of Corps of Engineers delineated this, Aegis, the gentleman up there, and about 4 years ago, 5, and but the Corps allowed them to, the developer that was going to have this, or had bought it, that we got it from as a neighborhood in Audubon and city and so forth, that developer was going to be allowed to pave over most of the wetland in there and save only the very lower section across here. And of course that wouldn't have made up for it. It would have been basically a storm garden detention site. And but they measure that little strip that's the wettest and count that, so it's like 1/3 of an acre of wetland or less in the middle of a 2-acre site. And the characteristics gradually change a little bit toward upland away from it, but there's wetland out all over that site, which means that to say you've got 0.25 or 0.35 acre of wetland, but it's a much bigger site that should be eliminated from development or whatever, because you can't save that little part without saving the rest of it. Basically, you've got to have the drainage area. It's own little watershed in a small parcel like this. This used to have a watershed that came from way across there, and when the Corps or a different expert delineated that land, the 28 acres that was cleared up here recently in the last year, and he said it didn't qualify at all, the part that was upstream from this. He said, no, that didn't qualify. But the kids that grew up playing in the trailer park that was over there in that area that did have big timber up to about a year ago, they could show you the crawdad mounds and where the water stood, and many native species of vegetation that you'd associate with wetland area. And but for some reason he didn't even count that, so it didn't count against them. So that 28 acres had probably, if you'd seen it as I have over the years and walked it in the low part on the creek that overflowed every year when the creek got up, you'd have said it had quite a few acres of wetland. But I think it was 2 or 3 acres, less than 2 or 3 acres, that they actually counted, and it was in that overflow area. But even there, they only counted the part that was a permanent stream down the middle and the associated ground. So I'm sure in agricultural coverage you have to limit it some similar way, otherwise you'd eliminate a lot of fields, wouldn't you?
Well, we have to take into consideration all 3 factors and then delineate it as accurately as possible. And then that's the area that's been affected. And so anyway, that's where the wetlands team come in for our agency, is that's their responsibility for doing those determinations, delineations.
The law allowed, when this came into effect, the wetlands law came into effect, they gave those farms that had been cleared prior to the law and had been farmed back before that time. Of course, they allowed them to use prior converted as a criteria. And so the prior converted land was not subject to the wetland law because it had been cleared and manipulated and farmed before the law came into effect. So most of the farmland, or a lot of the farmland that existed back then, of course, they got the prior converted designation, so they were free to farm as they had been farming. However, if there is what is called a farmed wetland area out there, if it's an area that ponds or floods a certain period during the growing season, it is subject to the wetland law. So they would have to farm that after it dried up enough that they could farm it. They couldn't drain it and manipulate it further. So they did have some outs back there as far as prior converted.
Sure, let's go ahead and cover the plants and then go out there and dig a hole or 2.
Yes, we need to move on. Look at your sheets on page, if you will, on page 14. I know we're skipping over some things, but are you familiar with obligates and facultative plants? And have you covered this in your coursework? Facultative?
We just briefly went over it.
Okay. The term facultative, of course, is a kind of a biological term that has to do with plants' adaptation or their ability to adapt to, you might say, wet situations or wet soils, hydric soils, or saturated soils. So, anyway, this gives us a little bit of information here as to
It's got a lot of background
gives
on
us a
this
little
site.
information as to how we look at those different plants. The obligates are those that will occur in 99% of the time in wet situations.
There is still some seed on many of these ambrosia plants. Many of them have already been broken down. And many other things in the yard producing seeds. I could ever get up early enough in the morning and just come out here and spend an hour filling a tape. They get a lot of good bird songs. They wake me up sometimes early and I listen. But I'm not ready to get up. You can see how these ambrosia stems have been stripped. And some of the others are pretty popular right now. The Bill Norman P Rose kind of have it up with a few items, but just needs a little of its bottom of the shell repaired. It's ready to go down the river. Too much brown in that oak tree over there. Roots have been cut with the construction work. It's too early for that. It's October 1st, 2006. A very wet September, late August, early September, and now it's dry again, but the ground hadn't all dried out, thank goodness. Barrier between us and that construction zone looks pretty good right now, but many of those plants are going to lose leaves and they'll be bare and open during the winter. The dust will be flying again, and the noise will be heavy. Looks like cardinals over here. Guess we put out a little corn yesterday on the fence. So seems like every bird from World Peace Wetland Prairie must have come over here sometime during the day and if they're grain eaters, check out the corn supply. Of course, we've got a lot of shade and a lot of relatively bare ground under here. The edge effect of the fence and various kinds of vegetation, so it makes good hunting for insects and so forth. One morning I'll make it up early and just record a couple hours of bird songs out here. Under the habitat tree. Unfortunately, they've got this slash and burn style restoration a little closer to this than we had expected. It's a little more extreme than we expected. So, even though there's been no significant frost yet, from here it looks like a strip of winter prairie instead of summer beauty that's hanging over most of it. Not every creature you find in the outdoors is a beloved creature. The black widow spider is feared and even hated by many people. But they serve their purpose in catching insects. They're part of the food chain. Something will come along and eat this one if she gets out open space like this for long, but not something you want the kids to pet. Oh, moves pretty fast. Hiding in the green. Be smart. The shade. Even though it's been a cool week, it's a hot day. The temperature is probably close to 80 now and going up. So let's see if we can get her to come out of her hidey hole again. Just for a moment. Here she goes again. I think out here on World Peace Wetland Prairie, and she's being peaceful. Just wants your bugs to eat. Well, we don't have any idea why they did it, except people tend to use the word cleanup, and think a dead tree is worthless, but you can see much of this willow is alive, and even the trunks that appeared to be dead were valuable to wildlife and contributed to shade. And the hawks would sit high in this tree to shop over this wetland area back here. They've still got some wetland acreage. And they've had somebody with a weed eater out on the wetland. They've mowed it. It's hard to imagine why they would have mowed it. The part that's in this right-of-way here has not been mowed. And there's a silt fence here where they've dug all this up, but we don't know why the silt fence is going in here unless they're planning a road over onto that lower part. I doubt they've had a wetland delineator out here. There are no marks of wetland delineation. So that needs to be done. And of course, right there's where the Soup Branch crosses and heads down along the southern edge of World Peace Wetland Prairie. This road's far from complete, next to 12th Street. It's generally not well managed here.
Taking things out by hand, and we're at risk of lots of those individuals walking away from the table.
Well, there's a place for heavy duty work, and there's a place for gentle work. If you go back there, for instance, you talked about button bushes or button willows as a replacement for the China honeysuckle, which is right now the main place that birds nest all through here is in China honeysuckle. That's true up and down the creek. So if you replace it, you need something there before you cut it down.
Well, I disagree with that. I think you have to cut it down and make a habitat, and then place it in immediately so that something can compete with it because it's coming back.
But we can't do this in a year and do it without doing harm. You know, we lost a year in the process, and so what we're getting is now trying to rush with it, and the rushing part of it's destructive. I mean, you got a grant for wildlife habitat primarily. What's the name of the organization? National Wildlife
U.S. Fish and Wildlife is a
Foundation.
5-star restoration rate.
Right. Okay. And the myth that you can restore it without damage, restore it to what? In other words,
restore it to a prairie and a wetland
to prairie. Okay.
Sure.
But we never.
Honeysuckle pad.
All right, honeysuckle can come off, but you know, we were talking about the button bushes. There are some button bushes, and the way we're cutting them out lately, you don't know whether you've taken button bushes. There's 100 species you'd want to get back, maybe 1,000 that you'd want to have to restore. We can't go find those species and purchase them and dig them all up. They're out there. So what you want is to keep them. If I went out there to the button willow bushes that have buttons on them so I could be sure what they are. And took a lot of the honeysuckle off so I could photograph them.
Sure. And no one else wants to put their time and energy into doing that.
Well, there's no rush that requires.
But there is a rush because the city will take it away. If you don't mow
who at the
up
city
here,
said if you didn't take it away? Mow up here is one thing.
Connie
The wildlife
Edmonston,
habitat back there.
Swifty, Brenda.
Well, Swifty won't be there long, and Brenda sure wouldn't take it away because it wasn't mowed. But up here is easy to mow. Back there should not be mowed. I mean, that's a whole other thing.
Seems to me the problem is the time and not so much the spot burning, because you can do little bitty spots and leave the rest alone. And then
Well, no, Aubrey's pretty much has stated that he's pretty much against any other removal because, like, Dr. Sagers was like, what if we tried saltwater? What if we tried this?
Saltwater.
And
So what does the saltwater kill? What's underground that lives on this habitat, this soil, in this situation, that will be harmed by saltwater?
Well, I guess the thing is it can't just be left. And if we want to continue to have money and support, then we're going to have to, you and Lauren, guys can draw up your proposal, and we're going to vote at the tag meeting.
Well, voting at the tag meeting, if you do it the rush up way with these things, you violate the purpose. And for these several years, I have talked to people about something that would contrast with the destruction all around us. Over there now, they're doing more. They've just mowed and they're paving and they're taking down parts, the dead parts off of that nice willow tree over there.
Sure.
So we don't want god-awful machines grinding things up without knowing what's being ground up.
Well,
The other day, the last time they had the thing, there were about 4 guys working on one tree. They were pulling brush off, or vines off, and cutting it up. When they got it all down, there was no honeysuckle in it. There were grapevines, which were wild native species, good for the birds and other things, and even for probably the butterflies. What other species was in there? Maybe some greenbrier or some berry vines, but anyway, none of those vines was honeysuckle. That tree was just worked over and pulled and stretched and strained for no good reason. None of that even needed to come off. See, we haven't surveyed it first.
Okay.
Even your grant says the first thing is to survey what's out there.
Which we can't walk through and...
But you can't walk through, but somebody has to do what she does and what he's done and what I've done, and that's get down and see what's under there, and somebody who can recognize it, not somebody like me who says, it's beautiful, you know. I know it feeds birds and it's beautiful, then I have to go look in a book to try to see if it's a native species that we want to save.
I hear you, but I just...
You're just concerned about the grant.
Well,
now,
it's not so much. I'm concerned
we
about
can meet
everybody
the needs
walking
of
away
the grant.
from the table. Because
there's no reason for anybody to walk away unless you mislead them into thinking we can come out here and bulldoze this in a few days and we'll have met the requirements.
I don't feel as though I can mislead PhD scientists that have invested their time.
How many PhD scientists have spent more than 10 hours on this?
Chuck West. Cindy Sagers has been getting all his emails, and she has been out and she has walked the thing.
Now, what's her major?
She is a plant biologist.
Yeah.
Jason Lucier, who's getting his PhD under Ken Smith, and Dub James, he's a birder. Don Farver is an engineer in hydraulics. Let's see, and Fran is a soil scientist, and Mindy's degree was environmental science, and mine was in zoology.
Yeah.
You know, so I just don't, I hear that, but I don't think that your perspective is, is the perspective of the entire group. And I feel as though we need to vote.
The group's perspective and the correct perspective, nobody knows whether anyone's perspective is complete or accurate.
Well, that's what I guess that's what I'm getting at this conversation.
We do know a great deal about it, that there are lots of extra things here from the clearing nearby that could get here.
Sure. And
there are lots of reasons that this habitat should stay as healthy as possible,
which
in contrast to that.
It's a deserted, the honeysuckle it's not a healthy habitat.
Oh,
it's not a healthful
Jennifer,
habitat.
if the turtles are using it underneath, thousands of insects are using it, thousands of butterflies are using it, thousands of birds are using it. There's a fox or two that camps out in here. There are deer still using it. Yeah. It's not deserted, worthless habitat. Well, it won't be improved by making it grassland. This is one of the things I learned from Joe Neal more than 4 years ago when he came. First he said it's a mounded wetland prairie. It's just like a small part of Wilson Spring. But it is this low drainage area that's wet, and it's got a lot of good woody vegetation on it, and you would never restore it to enough grassland to have the Henslow sparrow nest in that tall grass. If you got a little stand of tall grass, it won't be enough to have a significant population of anything that relies on that. It'll give a sample population. Maybe we'll see a Henslow sparrow come through and check it out. Sure. But it doesn't match Wilson Spring, and it needs to be closer to what it is. And what it is the drainage area off a much larger piece of prairie.
Sure.
And we've
Well-
emphasized that throughout. It was on the website nearly 4 years ago now, all that sort of stuff. And everybody I've talked to, including Dick, was about a peaceful place where we would restore that part, and we would have this nice area out here for the public. We're not competing with the botanical garden. You know, it should be we should be trying to teach the public that being mowed isn't necessarily good. A wetland prairie area shouldn't be mowed. You know, Audubon, Sierra, all the game and fish people is trying to keep people from making their lawns totally devoid of life except for one species of grass and the insects that like it, and having a lot of native species and a lot of natural things. And so, you know, we were pulling, or she was pulling it and I was photographing on a day-to-day basis 4 summers ago to document the value of it, not to say this ought to be ripped up and destroyed completely. She was showing, you know, this has to be removed so this can grow.
But I hear a lot. All I usually hear is complaining.
That's not, I'm not complaining. I'm talking about
working. And so the best thing I can
If we
say.
hadn't been photographing, we wouldn't have the luxury of being talking about this now.
Well, there's a lot of people that are in the project right now, and if they hadn't done their part of the project, we wouldn't all be sitting here talking.
Yes, it's very much a group project.
It's very much a group
and
project.
some of the people who've supported it have done it because they told it was of value, not that it was worthless and needed to be totally changed, that it was inherently valuable, and that it would easily be restored.
Okay, so we're going to
with
agree.
a massive.
We're going to need to agree to disagree because I'm feeling very frustrated. And so we need to agree to disagree, and let's bring it to the technical advisory meeting and vote. There'll be different strategies, and we can vote